Did you know that a single battle changed the course of World War II? The Pacific was a key part of the scenario. Imagine the following situation. Two legendary fighters, flying at over 600 kilometers per hour, facing off in a deadly duel over the infinite ocean. On one side, the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, fast, lethal, and almost impossible to hit, the Allies' nightmare. On the other, the Grumman F6F Hellcat, armored, merciless, and created to hunt the predator. But how did the Japanese fighter, which seemed invincible, end up being shot down like flies? In this video, you will delve into the most brutal aerial battle of World War II, a confrontation where every maneuver could mean life or death, and where the sky became the stage for a historic turnaround that few know about, but that changed everything. In 1937, the Empire Japan, in the midst of expanding its military ambitions, issued a challenge to its aeronautical industry to create a naval fighter superior to any other in existence, an aircraft capable of dominating the skies and projecting Japanese naval power across vast oceans. 3 years later, Mitsubishi, under the brilliant leadership of engineer Jiro Horikoshi, presented the world with a masterpiece of engineering, the A6M, which would be immortalized by the name Zero. The Zero was not just an airplane, it was a philosophy, extremely light, thanks to the innovative use of an aluminum alloy called extra super rigid derailment and a minimalist fuselage that dispensed with any weight considered superfluous. It displayed astonishing agility. Its range was phenomenal for the time, exceeding 2,000 kilometers with external tanks, allowing it to escort bombers on deep missions and patrol vast ocean areas. In combat, the Zero was a ghost. It made sharp turns that seemed to defy the laws of physics, outmaneuvering any Allied fighter of the early years of the war. Armed with two 20mm cannons in the wings and two 7.0-7.0mm machine guns in the engine cowling, its fire ripped through enemy planes before they even had a chance to react adequately. During the first devastating months of the Pacific War, from December 1941 onwards, the Zero was a protagonist of a series of crushing victories. At Pearl Harbor, it swept away American air resistance. In the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies, the stories were the same. Squadrons of Zeros appearing like specters, dismantling Allied formations with brutal efficiency. Pilots of fighters such as the P-40 Warhawk, the Brewster Buffalo, and the Hawker Hurricane, previously confident in their machines, found themselves terribly outmatched. Many Allied pilots, if they were lucky enough to survive an encounter with the Zero, returned to their bases with tales of a nearly invincible fighter, capable of maneuvering in ways they never imagined possible. The Zero shock was established, and the legend of the supreme Japanese fighter began to be forged in fire and blood. But every legend, however imposing, carries within it the seeds of its own vulnerability. The Zero's apparent perfection came at a hidden cost, a dangerous compromise made in the name of agility and range. To achieve such extraordinary performance, Japanese engineers, under pressure from extremely demanding naval requirements, made critical sacrifices in one vital aspect: protection. The Zero lacked significant armor to protect the pilot. Its fuel tanks, unlike the emerging American designs, were not self-sealing, a technology that prevented leaks and fires when hit. The airframe itself, though light and aerodynamically efficient, was not designed to absorb major damage. A single well-aimed shot from an American .50 caliber machine gun, or a single cannon hit, was often enough to turn the elegant Zero into a ball of fire, a torch falling from the sky. Its pilots, however skilled, were tragically exposed. As the war dragged on and the fighting intensified, these inherent weaknesses began to take a terrible toll. American and Allied pilots, initially unprepared and overwhelmed, began to learn the hard way. They studied every turn, every dive, every blind spot of the Japanese fighter. Tactics such as the boom and zoom, in which one would dive at high speed on the Zero, fire a burst, and then climb quickly, avoiding the circular combat in which the Zero was king, began to be employed with greater effectiveness. The capture of a nearly intact A6M Zero at Akutan in the Aleutian Islands in July 1942 was a turning point. Exhaustive testing revealed all of the fighter's secrets, all of its strengths, and crucially, all of its weaknesses. The Zero's once unshakable legend began to show its first fatal cracks, and the United States, with its colossal industrial and technological capabilities, decided it was time to strike back with full force. The American response to the Zero threat was already being forged on the drawing boards of Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, a company that would become known as the Iron Works for its incredibly rugged aircraft. Led by Leroy Grumman, the company's engineers listened closely to reports from pilots who had faced the Zero with the Hellcat's predecessor, the F4F Wildcat. They knew that the Wildcat, while rugged, was slower and less maneuverable. A new Predator was needed. Development of the F6F Hellcat was a race against time, driven by the urgency of war. Just 18 months after its first prototype flight, a remarkable feat of engineering and mass production, the Hellcat began arriving on U.S. Navy carriers in the Pacific in mid-1943. And it didn't come to compete, it came to dominate. The Hellcat was the antithesis of the Zero's design philosophy. If the Zero was an agile samurai with a sharp katana, the Hellcat was an armored gladiator with a war hammer, equipped with a powerful Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double Wasp engine, the same one that powered fighters like the P-47 Thunderbolt and the F-4U Corsair. The Hellcat had plenty of power. Its fuselage was reinforced, capable of withstanding considerable punishment. The pilot sat in an armor-plated cockpit. Its fuel tanks were self-sealing, and its armament was brutal. 6 Browning M2.50 caliber, 12.7 millimeters machine guns, with a volume of fire capable of disintegrating any enemy aircraft. The Hellcat did not try to beat the Zero in a tight-turn duel. It brought a new concept to naval air combat, winning through diving speed, climb rate, brute force, the ability to absorb damage and keep fighting. The Hellcat's first official combat mission took place in August 1943, and the results were immediate. Within months, combat reports began to paint a drastically different picture. American pilots, now flying a superior machine in many crucial respects and utilizing improved tactics, were finally turning the tide against the dreaded Zero. The stage for the definitive confrontation between the Hellcat and the Zero will be fought over the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean in aerial battles that would define control of the skies and, consequently, the fate of the strategic islands. In the Mariana Islands in June 1944, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, which would become known among American pilots as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the Hellcat demonstrated its superiority in an overwhelming way. The sky was transformed into an immense battlefield where there was no room for the slightest mistake. Every turn, every risky dive, every burst of machine gun fire was an instant decision between life and death. The Zero, even with updated models, was still a dangerously agile adversary at low speeds, and in the hands of a veteran pilot, it remained a threat. However, the Hellcat had decisive advantages. Its greater diving speed allowed American pilots to dictate the terms of the fight, attack and escape, or force the Zero to altitudes and speeds where its performance declined. The Hellcat's ruggedness meant that it could withstand impacts that would have disintegrated the Zero, allowing its pilots, even if hit, to continue fighting or return safely to their aircraft carriers. The American pilots, increasingly experienced and well-trained, began employing team tactics with skill. The Thatch Weave, a defensive maneuver developed by Commander John S. Jimmy Thatch, in which 2 or more fighters covered each other, making themselves difficult targets for attackers, was particularly effective. A Hellcat could lure a Zero into pursuit while its wingmen appear behind or above the Japanese plane, catching it by surprise. Air superiority, once the almost exclusive domain of Japan, changed hands dramatically. The skies over the Pacific now had a new, more fearsome predator. The age of the Hellcat had arrived. The cold, unforgiving numbers tell the story of the Hellcat's rise and the Zero's decline incontrovertibly. Over its operational career, the Grumman F6F Hellcat was credited with destroying more than 5,200 enemy aircraft in aerial combat, with approximately 4,950 of those being shot down by U.S. Navy and Marine Corps Hellcats in the Pacific. That's more than half of all Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat by the Americans in the Pacific theater. Even more impressive is its victory rate. On average, for every Hellcat loss in aerial combat, 19 enemy aircraft were shot down, a crushing ratio that established it as the most effective fighter in U.S. Navy history and one of the most lethal of all World War II. Battles such as the one in the Philippines saw hundreds of Japanese aircraft, including many Zeros, shot down with relatively small American losses. Meanwhile, the Zero, which had once dominated the skies with its unparalleled agility, was becoming increasingly obsolete in the face of evolving American technology and tactics. Japanese attempts to modernize the Zero by adding more armor or more powerful engines often compromised its legendary maneuverability, without being able to match the overall performance of the Hellcat or other newer Allied fighters. Japan, with its limited industrial base and suffering from bombing and naval blockade, simply could not produce replacements that were worthy or in sufficient numbers to stem the tide. The Hellcat not only challenged the Zero's legend, it shattered it, and with it, Japan's aerial dominance in the Pacific. The Japanese supremacy in the air, which had seemed so absolute in the early years of the war, was finally over. With the Hellcats dominating the skies, the way was clear for the consolidation of American naval power and for the bloody but inexorable island-hopping campaign that would lead the Allies to victory in the Pacific. But behind every kill, every statistic, there was a human story. Young pilots on both sides, with their dreams, fears, and hopes, risking everything in brutal aerial combat that often lasted mere seconds. The war was increasingly fought by sophisticated and deadly machines, but it was still decided by the courage, skill, and at times the luck of the men who flew them. The Zero, in its final days, was often relegated to kamikaze missions, a desperate testament to its obsolescence as a pure fighter, but also to fanatical determination of its pilots. The duel between the Mitsubishi A6M Zero and the Grumman F6F Hellcat went beyond the simple confrontation between two aircraft. It became a powerful symbol of the American turnaround in the Pacific, a chronicle of technological innovation, tactical adaptation, industrial rivalry, and, above all, of unbreakable human resilience in the face of the adversities of war. A lesson in how the course of history can be altered by the combination of ingenuity, strategy, and the courage of those who fight in the skies. And that, my dear friends, was the story of the aerial battle that helped change the course of the war in the Pacific, the epic clash between the Zero and the Hellcat, a demonstration of how technology, tactics, and the human spirit can converge to rewrite destiny. If you are fascinated by these stories of rivalry, military strategy, technological innovations, and the indomitable courage of those who shaped our past, be sure to subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell so you don't miss a single detail. Because in the next videos, we will delve even deeper into the war machines and the minds behind them. We will reveal, for example, which Japanese fighter was the one that desperately tried to replace the Zero in its final hour, and why it, despite its merits, also failed to stem the tide. You won't want to miss it. Until next time,